Today we're diving deep into a tragic Norse myth, a story about a fallen Valkyrie, broken oaths, and brutal revenge. And we're going to figure out what her story can actually teach us about the choices we face in our own lives. So let's just start with that big question right off the bat. Can a story about gods and warriors, something that feels so ancient, really teach us anything meaningful about honor in the modern world? Well, you might be surprised. Because, as you're about to see, Brynhildr's story isn't just some dusty old tale. It's an incredible, tragic case study in what it means to have integrity, the corrosive power of lies, and, the devastating price of revenge. All right, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at an act of defiance against a god. Then, we'll see how lies poison everything. After that, the terrible price of vengeance. Then, a final, fateful choice, integrity over just surviving. And we'll wrap it all up with 4 lessons that are, frankly, as relevant today as they were 1,000 years ago. Okay, so our story kicks off not with a mistake, but with a truly heroic act of defiance. It's a choice of conscience, that actually sets this whole tragedy in motion. So here's the setup. Brynhildr, a Valkyrie, gets a direct order from the top, from Odin himself, to make sure a certain king wins a battle. But she looks at the situation and she decides, you know what, the other guy is more worthy. And right there, that's her first massive, fateful choice, putting her own judgment ahead of the command of an all-powerful god. And this, right here, this is the conflict that drives the entire story. On one hand, you have the absolute, unquestionable authority of Odin. But on the other, you have one person's conscience saying, no, this is what's right. That tension is everything. So the very first lesson from her story is all about the courage it takes to think for yourself. It frames following your conscience not as some kind of sin, but as a noble act, even when you know and she knew that the personal cost was going to be absolutely crushing. All right, so let's move on to our second part and see how this act of defiance snowballs into the central tragedy, which is where deception enters the picture and just unravels everything. Now, to really get what happens next, you have to understand just how powerful oaths were in Norse culture. I mean, we're talking about a world before written contracts. Your word wasn't just a promise, it was the literal foundation of social trust. Breaking an oath, well, that was like poisoning the well for the entire community. And so the central betrayal in this story, where the hero, Sigurd, is tricked by magic into deceiving Brynhildr, it has these awful but really different consequences for both of them. For Sigurd, it completely shatters his integrity, his sense of self. But for Brynhildr, the public humiliation of being tricked into a marriage she never would have chosen, it makes her life completely unbearable. And at the end of the day, the story is this stark, brutal warning. It doesn't matter what your intentions were, even if the lies were told to try and help someone. The myth basically tells us that deception eventually will poison the world and lead to total ruin. This brings us to the really tragic turning point. The betrayal has happened, the humiliation is real, and now Brynhildr herself pivots from hero to, well, an agent of destruction. And what makes this so heartbreaking is that before all this, Brynhildr is this incredible figure of wisdom. Seriously, after she's punished by Odin, she actually becomes a mentor to Sigurd, teaching him runes and giving him advice about patience and self-control. But when she's the one who's betrayed, she can't take her own advice. She is completely consumed by shame and this all-encompassing need for vengeance. And she transforms from that wise counselor into an instrument of total, world-breaking destruction. And here's the lesson for us, right? It's a powerful warning about how nursing a grievance, how letting that burning passion for revenge go unchecked, can completely destroy your own credibility and lead to absolute self-destruction. And you end up taking down everyone you care about right along with you. Okay, so now we've reached Brynhildr's final act. Her vengeance is complete. The hero Sigurd is dead because of her. And now she makes a choice that completely redefines her entire story. Her story boils down to this one profound ethical question that she has to answer, and that it forces us to think about too. After all the lies, all the betrayal, all the destruction, is a life of shame actually worth living? And to understand her choice, we have to understand her world. For the Norse, honor wasn't just some nice idea. It was more valuable than life itself. To live in a state of shame or compromise, that wasn't really living at all. So her decision to join Sigurd on his funeral pyre, it's not a surrender. No way. It's the ultimate assertion of her own truth, her own authenticity. It's this final, powerful act where she reclaims her own agency, transforming herself from a victim of everyone else's schemes into the master of her own end. So after all of that fire and tragedy, what is Brynhildr's legacy? What are we supposed to take away from all this? Well, let's distill it down into 4 core lessons. Okay, let's walk through these. First, honor. Think of integrity as a kind of currency. Once you spend it on lies, it's almost impossible to earn back. Second, composure. Flying off the handle and acting on short-term rage completely erodes your long-term credibility. Third, truth. There's this incredible idea. The fire you avoid today will consume your hull tomorrow. Deal with your problems head-on, or they'll come back bigger. And finally, fate. You can't escape the consequences of your choices, but you can always choose how you meet them. At the end of the day, Brynhildr's story isn't just an old myth. It's really a timeless mirror for our own ethical struggles. It's this powerful and, frankly, kind of scary reminder about the real, lasting consequences of the choices we make about truth, honor, and revenge. And that leaves us with this one final thought, a piece of wisdom from this ancient world. The fire you avoid today will consume your hull tomorrow. It's this incredible warning about the danger of putting off difficult conversations, of avoiding hard truths, because the problems we refuse to face today have a nasty habit of returning later, and they're usually far more destructive than they were at the start.